It's interesting thinking about a lot of the conversations we're having reminds me of when I first started looking at AI and some of the issues that were coming about, and a lot of them shared some of the same concerns. The first one was the non-human identity. That's the biggest one that came up
Yeah,
a lot. And I was thinking about it as people started creating these agents and using their own, access to grant this to the agents. The first thing that came to mind was, well, that's easy. Just create a service
yeah,
account for
yeah,
them, right?
yeah,
And I thought that that was, it's a little better, but
yeah,
it doesn't really address the core issue.
yeah,
And so service account still has that broad permission.
yeah,
Sitting in, going back to that
yeah,
Zendesk story that I shared, that database, that individual has access to a lot of information. The user knows not to pull or share or
yeah,
transfer that information, but automating that workflow to make their days a lot easier, you really don't think through some of those stuff. So, when you go through that, there's no policy enforcement. There's
yeah.
no way to detect if it's doing something that it shouldn't. Can you walk us through a little bit about, if they had that AI gateway, what is it that the AI gateway would see?
Yeah.
Could you pull the covers on that a
Yeah,
little
so
bit?
I think the way to think about this, right? Like I think your examples around service account and humans, right? Ultimately, even when we are bringing in service accounts, we want without the agents into the setup, right? There in your DevOps pipelines where the service accounts are used, you want a human to be responsible for this, right? You have to start thinking of agents as your kind of mini me employees, right, working on your behalf rather than simple tools, right? The moment you start thinking about it, there are a couple of things that you need to assign to an agent, right? Uh, it could be the human identity on whose behalf things are working. It could be the service account identity as well, which is the NHI, right? So that's part of it. The agent's identity itself. So first thing, whose behalf is it working on? Second thing is who is this agent and what is it supposed to do? And I call it the kind of job description of this agent,
Yeah.
right? Uh, so you're combining the two things together when your interactions are actually happening, right? So what sequence allows you to do is we create a trace or a log of every interaction that the agent is having on whose behalf. So you could have an email assistant. The agent has its identity, right? It is working on your behalf. Your behalf is I have my agent. You have your agent, Randy. So individual logs of what did the agent do on whose behalf at what time, what did it do, did it send an email, did it read an email along the way, did it access sensitive information, right? And like did it go rogue for any reason? So that entire trace is available when you bring in a gateway like sequence, and all outside of the agent itself. Because think about, like, if you're asking the agent as instructions to do certain things and it hallucinates or prompt injects or does tries to be super helpful to do certain things, it will try to override those instructions because it has control over it, right? Versus we with the gateway concept, we keep it outside the perimeter of the agent, right? Or at the perimeter, right?
Yeah.
The agent is not allowed to touch it, it only can interact through it, right? So any interaction that the agent has on anybody's behalf, you have a full trace of what the actual agent does.
Yeah. It's a good additional control to have in place. Keeping it outside of that agent is
Yeah.
good. If you don't mind, I'd like to switch it up a little bit and talk more about foundation, and how it has to come first.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about what we talked before, but reintroduce Dr. Chase Cunningham's argument, which, I think both of us agree on, and that's visibility, policy engines, and segmentation have to exist
Yeah.
before you let AI, drive anything real in your
Yeah.
environment or any automation. Obviously, there's a lot of testing and done, so forth, but a lot of that is accelerated with the help of anybody being able to implement some of this work. And when we look at Sequence, you talked about this. Sequence has been doing API security for many, many years, and that's where the company started. And when I look at the AI gateway, it's not just a separate product bottled on. sitting on top of infrastructure that already
Yeah.
understands how to watch for API traffic, enforce policies, and flag anomalies. And so, how much of the API security foundation directly became kind of the backbone of what AI Gateway is today?
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring this up. So number one is what we spoke about, like sequences, roots, and doing three things. Understand where your APIs are, rogue APIs, and sort of like some things that have been forgotten for a while but can still be abused. Just cataloging, documenting, assessing them for risk, right? And then ultimately detecting and preventing abuse. That was sequences, roots, right? Uh, Last year when we came into this um, AI agent protection, zero trust for agents, and things like that, the way it actually started, some of these largest enterprises that actually use us on a daily basis. The first thing that they did was, I need to enable my crown jewels, my applications, my data for agentic interaction, and they started building MCP servers.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first wave, right? In this direction. It's moving along the way, right? But so they have thousands of APIs, right? That they wanted to convert into MCP, and they had a team dedicated that could have taken them months to years to translate to MCP, right? The sequence, when we had cataloged all these things, right? Like we we told them that, look, why don't we help you along the way? Like we can instantly translate some of the APIs, at least you know each one of them well. You know from the risk perspective is like what are they exposing, things like that. How do I safely enable for that? So without writing any single line of code. So that's why AI Gateway was actually born, right? So then it we couldn't just stop there, right? So the concept of identities came in next,
Yeah.
right? So these APIs, yes, at the backside of it, you could make it work with uh, service accounts, or effectively think of it as even JOT tokens, API keys, and things like that. But the uh, agents had to be tied to an identity, right? Like the user identity and then the concept of agent identity. So Sequence brought in that concept, connected the human identities to your identity providers, right? So it was not just about, okay, the identity providers can authenticate you who you are, right? But along the way, Sequence controls the access of, even though you have access to many things on your email system, this agent is only allowed or authorized to maybe will read emails, and not, I'm not going to allow you to send emails or delete emails, right? So we combined the two concepts and brought it as a single box into that. So identity came along the way, right? And then when these interactions became more autonomous, right? Like, can you go ahead and fix this problem for me, right? And how do I stop this along the way? This is where the other roots around the behavioral detection and protection, right? Sequence started creating this behavioral identities for these agents and keep them in those guardrails in terms of what is the agent allowed to do, right? In fact, we recently announced a concept called agent persona, right? Like every mini-me agent, right? That Randy, you have, right? You're going to have a dozen or so mini-me agents, right? Doing different things for help you on your day-to-day lives,
When
right?
you say stuff like that, it reminds me of, my daughter's really young. I'll show her how I'm gonna cook, but I don't want her to cook. That's the rule. I'm gonna make sure you don't do that. You
Yeah.
gotta just follow it.
Yeah, exactly. So you provided those instructions, right?
Yeah.
Right. So those job descriptions are, think of it like these are instructions for the agent, these are prompts for your agent, these are skills that you are importing in the agent. Those are the guiding rules for the agent, right? Now that's all you need, right? But based on that, you get the right level of access, right? On only that access, nothing more than that, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the agent persona gives you, right? On top of that, if you don't need access to sensitive information, your job description does not need access to customer information, like to your point, like connecting to Zendesk. Like I connected the agent to Zendesk, right? That example that you spoke about when we began this conversation is, in that case, the agent should not have fetched any sensitive information. If I can have that assurance, then I'm fine, right? So can I automatically redact this stuff because the agent's job description does not need this kind of data, right? And if the agent does not is not allowed to do certain things, right? So think of it like a positive security model, right? Like you're only allowed to do certain things, everything else you're actually denied, right?
Yeah.
So creating that behavioral ring around that agent is the next thing that we did. So starting with the agent persona as a concept, translating those semantic rules and policies into deterministic guardrails is what ultimately AI Gateway does using AI, agent personas.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of a movie where somebody says we're limited with the technology we had at the time. And so when we think about access, we want to limit people's access, but part of that we train with awareness. Here's what you should do, here's another way you can't do that to agents. And I think I heard somebody at one point says awareness training just doesn't work. And to some extent, yeah, it's really pushed by compliance than anything, but it really doesn't work on agents at all.
Yeah.
They don't have that context awareness around them. And so not having that technology, we had to settle with the foundational security controls we had at the time, and we still do today. And so we can apply that over to agents today. So that's why having new technology, revisiting your technology stack, making sure that it's the right one for the environment or the era that you live in now around AI makes a lot more sense. And so that's kind of the conversation we're having in the CISO community is, do we continue down the path of these great big tools that we've been using for many, many years, now that they say they have AI, which is really bolted on, versus, something that's, I hear people use the term architected in, or, and so forth. So, revisiting your tech stack is going to be very important.
Yeah.
But